Hail and well met, adventurers. I'm your host, the Dungeon Master, and in this video I'm going to be taking a closer in-depth look at the opening cinematic sequence of Final Fantasy VII Remake, coming out eventually on the 10th of April 2020. Now the trailer starts off with what can only be described as the most amazing shot of the Badlands surrounding the city of Midgar that I've ever seen. This is both reminiscent of the end of the original Final Fantasy VII, as well as, of course, the opening of the film Advent Children, since the two are essentially the same thing. But if this is indicative of the level of detail that we can expect in terms of the topography of Midgar and the surrounding area, it's no wonder that this is going to be quite daunting for fans of Final Fantasy VII Remake, because Midgar alone is huge. But that being said, if we're sticking with this scale, and it's to be believed, we have a lot of ground to cover, and that's all I'm going to say on that. As the trailer moves onward, we follow the view of a bird, possibly an eagle, judging by the color and style of its feathers, flying over the outer edges of the city of Midgar on the furthest outskirts. Now, those of you who have previously watched the E3 2015 reveal trailer for Final Fantasy VII Remake may remember that the bird in that particular trailer was a dove and not an eagle. Not really sure why they changed the type of bird, but nonetheless, it actually seems a bit more fitting with the tone that the opening cinematic sequence is going for. As the eagle flies ever onwards on its journey through the sky, we get a very detailed glimpse of the upper plate of Midgar City, and I am still marveling at the quality of the level of detail, both in the architecture and the overall skyline. This is truly a sight to behold. Words definitely cannot do it justice alone. Here is another comparative shot from the 2015 reveal trailer of some of the high-rise structures and areas in this particular area of Midgar, and the level of detail is still quite exquisite, but I believe that it has actually gone further in the light of the delays from March to April, which is a very good thing, because it shows that the developers of Final Fantasy VII Remake, Square Enix, and everyone else involved are in fact dedicated to making this the best possible experience imaginable, by far. Back to the opening cinematic now, and we get a glimpse of one of the many motorway interstates circulating throughout Midgar, and we also get a glimpse of a road sign that clearly indicates Sector 6, with an off-ramp sign pointing with numbers 614 to 624. Now, bear in mind the fact that Sector 6, as of the opening sequence of Final Fantasy VII, is the only part of Midgar that has yet to undergo full completion, as you will see much later in this video. Again, another comparative shot from the E3 2015 trailer, and even after nearly 5 years, this shot still looks as impressive as it did way back when. And of course there's another sign saying 7th Gate, another exit 1 mile away. But it's interesting to see just the sheer amount of detail that went into Midgar's construction. Below the Sector 6 sign, we get a glimpse of quite a number of housing beneath the bridge there, which, if the sign is to be believed, this is the top plate in the area known as Sector 5. And if my memory is correct, Sector 5 is one of Shinra's crown jewels within the crown jewel that is Midgar itself. Basically, I seem to recall it being the some of the more well-to-do ritzier aspects of Midgar for Shinra employees and workers. That's if my mind isn't playing tricks on me. Now the next few shots here were actually in the presentation witnessed by none other than Maximilian Dude, the special Final Fantasy VII Remake press event in which he got to see a far more put together sequence than the regular demo that the public got to see. Now these were also leaked during the Gamescom events, and I believe they had something to do with a Shinra propaganda video with subtitles here and there explaining Shinra's propaganda message that Midgar was pretty much a good place to live and the future of Mako and everything. But that doesn't seem to be the case for this opening cinematic. But I wonder, that actually makes me speculate whether or not we might actually witness that very Shinra propaganda video inside the world of Final Fantasy VII Remake. And if that's true, I definitely hope so. But getting back to this shot, the architecture in Sector 5 is an interesting blend of styles, because originally Midgar was in the most part inspired by the architecture of New York. However, here there are a blend of sort of post-World War II aesthetics mixed in with a more modern 90s element as well. So it's interesting that Midgar is a kind of like a bohemian blending of styles that actually gives it a very unique sense of identity and aesthetic, which is a very nice touch. Now as the cinematic continues, we get a glimpse of 3 children riding bicycles, and we're going to pretty much be following them for a good portion of the opening cinematic. But in the background there you can see a giant vehicle there that is very reminiscent to something that we actually witnessed in the original Final Fantasy VII. It's one of Shinra's construction views that originally one can be found in ruins and shambles. However, somewhere in the Sector 6 area between Sector 5 and War Market. So it's nice that we actually get to see it in full detail. Now as the children ride their merry way through the streets of Sector 5, they pass a vehicle that I'm sure many classic Final Fantasy VII fans will instantly recognize. Believe it or not, this is the SA-37 type motor tricycle. Even though it looks like a truck, it is actually registered as a tricycle because it has 2 front wheels and it only has 1 rear wheel, despite having the body of a truck, which is an interesting design by Shinra. But it is iconic for being the vehicle in which the party members sans Cloud used to make their escape from Shinra altogether, and also making their way out of Midgar entirely by the end of, well, Final Fantasy VII Remake, and in the original escape sequence in the classic Final Fantasy VII. So it's nice they're bringing that back, along with a lot of other things. We also get a glimpse of more contemporary vehicles manufactured by Shinra, and we also see a couple of mechanics installing, one of which is installing what appears to be canisters filled with Mako energy into the hood of one particular car that could very well be another Type 37 from this angle when judging from the color scheme. Further on, we see an even more contemporary neighborhood area with the dog scavenging out from a contemporary dustbin, which again just adds to the normalcy of Midgar in broad daylight. Here we get a closer glimpse of the robotic arm crane that is being used by the Shinra maintenance workers to decommission one of the many piping areas throughout the city. So it's nice to actually see it fully functional as opposed to the one that is completely disheveled lying on the road in the middle of the Sector 6 slums. The three children eventually come to a halt at their destination, which happens to be a playground very reminiscent of the one in the Sector 6 slums, except that this playground is not in the Sector 6 slums, but on top of the Sector 5 plate near the edge. Now, I'm going to posit a theory that these playgrounds, while identical, are probably a holdover from Midgar's days before it was renovated by Shinra Incorporated. Don't take my word for it, but it is an interesting thought. We then cut to a shot of a withered flower and patch of grass on a corner just diagonally from the playground. Now, while that might initially look to passers-by that it's just because of dry weather, we of the Final Fantasy VII fandom know better. But this is in fact a byproduct of Shinra using their Mako reactors to suck Mako energy from the planet, something that the anti-Shinra organization Avalanche is adamant on stopping, albeit through very extremist means, as Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy VII Remake will make very apparent. As time passes, the day turns from afternoon to evening, and I love the incredible amount of detail of the lighting and the sunset over the Sector 5 playground. Also, once it gets sufficiently dark, the street lamps actually do flicker on, so at least Shinra have that working when it comes to the time of day. But once again, you'll notice the sheer lack of greenery at the heart of Midgar's upper plate. At some point, we get a close-up of the eye of the little girl as she stares straight at the Mako Reactor 5, located right near the edge of the upper plate of the Sector 5 area. And it is definitely a nice cinematic touch on the part of Square Enix. Now here is a very similar shot taken from the E3 2015 reveal trailer, and that same little girl is actually looking at something else, something completely different. I won't say what it is here and spoil anything for new fans of Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy VII Remake, but old school fans should be very much aware of what it is that the little girl is now beholding in this particular shot here. Now we get a shot of the exterior of Mako Reactor 5 from the little girl's perspective, and again, the level of detail here is just absolutely breathtaking. If we had gotten Final Fantasy VII Remake on the PS3, I doubt it would look anywhere as amazing with this as it does here, and it definitely shows that the extra month of delays that have been taken by the developers of Final Fantasy VII Remake is definitely going to pay off dividends as they put that last coat of polish on the level of detail for the upcoming April 10th release. As the camera rises higher and higher into the evening sky, we get a very interesting Marco Borealis effect from the top of the Marco Reactor 5, which leads into a transition that many classic fans of Final Fantasy VII will remember with absolute nostalgia. I know I certainly do. That very transition takes us to the heart of Sector 8's Loveless Avenue, where Aerith Gainsborough is kneeling next to a ruptured Marco pipe, seemingly listening to the live stream within. However, in a departure from the original opening FMV, something truly ominous starts to happen. The shadows start encroaching further, and the lights start flickering ominously, foreshadowing something very, very foreboding indeed. And something that I haven't mentioned up until this point is the fact that as the opening sequence is playing, the lyrics "Estrans interi irave ementi" can be heard at various points throughout the cinematic. Now those lyrics are Latin, which translate as "burning inside with violent anger." And their significance here is very important because they form the chorus of the theme One-Winged Angel, which is the final boss theme of Safer Sephiroth, or Seraph Sephiroth. Safer Sephiroth, of course, being a PlayStation mistranslation. But you don't hear One-Winged Angel until the very end of Final Fantasy VII. So the fact that the first two lyrics of One-Winged Angel are being foreshadowed at the very opening FMV of Final Fantasy VII Remake is an allusion to the fact that Sephiroth has a much greater role early on, and also showcases that as foreboding and terrible as the Shinra Corporation is as a threat, the Shinra Electric Power Company, Sephiroth himself, the former soldier hero, is actually going to be an even greater threat than even Shinra. Aerith is of course understandably wary and terrified of what's happening around her at this moment in time, and immediately flees for the safety of the main streets of Sector 8. And you can see there is a cafe next to the Loveless Theatre to Aerith's left, and you can see some patrons inside, and there are a lot of passers-by on the streets. But even though the people walking around completely oblivious to what is going on in their daily lives, only Aerith has some intuition as to what fate awaits the city of Midgar, which definitely sends chills down my spine, I can tell you that. Unfortunately, because she's distracted by what she knows is inevitably coming, Aerith unfortunately bumps into several passers-by who do not seem particularly friendly to people selling flowers on the streets of the upper plate of Midgar. Having several of her flowers knocked to the ground, Aerith kneels down in an attempt to pick them up, with several other passers-by looking at her curiously, but then going back to their daily lives and moving on to wherever it is that they're trying to go to, making completely no effort to help the young woman whatsoever. Eventually, a man carrying a box is walking along the sidewalk and, right on cue, without even noticing, stands on the one remaining flower that Aerith is just about to pick up. Now, there is an in-joke from the original Final Fantasy about not stepping on the flowers at the Sector 5 in the Sector 5 church and the Sector 5 slums, but to see somebody actually stand on one of Aerith's flowers without a second thought or even a first thought actually is not amusing at all, and a lot of people were genuinely as upset as Aerith was when this happened, myself included. Aerith then manages to pick up the crushed flower and holds it forlornly in her hands, a scene that was foreshadowed in one of the recent 2019 trailers, I believe. I think it was one of the extended trailers, if memory serves. The camera then pulls back to give us a very exquisite shot of the entirety of the upper plate of Midgar, and we finally get introduced to the iconic Final Fantasy VII Remake logo in a very reminiscent style to the original. And I actually have to say that between the extended trailer and the opening FMV, maybe it's just me, but I think that a bit more detail to the lighting and shading has definitely been added to the opening cinematic to make Midgar stand out even more in the dark hours of the evening. Something that I feel really shows in this opening cinematic. And you can also see not just the lights of the upper plate, but you can see the lights of the slums in the breaks between each section of the plate, which is very, very much attention to detail at its finest. Also, the music builds up exactly as the original does, which is very much a heartening moment for all the fans of both the original Final Fantasy VII as well as this upcoming remake. And of course, as we all know, on this very night, it is the night that Avalanche finally launched their daring raid against Shinra, the Shinra Electric Power Company, by attempting to sabotage Marker Reactor 1. And thus the camera pulls away from the skyline of Midgar and Shinra headquarters and goes straight into the train as it makes its way towards the ill-fated Marker Reactor, and a very nice touch of cinema there. And as the train pulls into the station, we see a very epic shot of Cloud Strife, ex-soldier and mercenary who is a sword for hire for the small Avalanche insurgency cell that are determined to finally take the fight to Shinra's doorstep. Very literally, I might add. On the Sector 1 train platform are a pair of Shinra security officers who are the lowest ranking security officers, although one of them is, I think, maybe both of them are wearing red scarves, which denotes at the very least they are not ordinary Shinra officers. That being said, they're no match for either a bunch of Avalanche rebels, let alone a former soldier turned sword for hire, like Cloud. Case in point, the two soldiers are, or the two security officers, I should say, not to be confused with soldiers, are quickly dispatched by the duo of Biggs and Jesse before they are shortly joined by their other companion, Wedge. And of course, all three of these people are members of Avalanche, as we all well know by this point. We then get a very dramatic look at the Avalanche cell leader Barrett Wallace with his iconic gun arm attached to his right hand, or where his right hand would be. And in the original Final Fantasy VII, Barrett, Biggs, Wedge, Jesse, and also Tifa Lockhart as well are the only members of Avalanche that ever encountered in the original Final Fantasy VII. But in the Final Fantasy VII Remake, Avalanche is much larger, and Barret is only the leader of a handful of Avalanche members. Interestingly, however, I saw that Barrett's biography on the Final Fantasy VII website, or one of them at least, actually says that some of the other Avalanche factions are wary of Barret because out of all of them, he is too extreme for their liking. This is somewhat ironic if you're familiar with the events of the compilation of Final Fantasy VII title Before Crisis, but we're not going to get into the compilation of Final Fantasy VII here because we want to get straight into the heart of the action with the Final Fantasy VII Remake. But bear that in mind, ladies and gentlemen. We finish off with Cloud Strife leaping from the train and magnificently holstering his mighty Buster Sword as he stands up on the platform. And as we saw in the Square Enix game demonstration, the camera would at one point swivel round to the back of Cloud Strife's head, looking in front of him, and the gameplay would actually begin. And judging from the way that that demonstration went, yeah, it looks like there will be as very seamless and little transition between the actual FMVs and gameplay as much as possible. Which, again, is a testament to just how much time, effort, and creativity have gone into the Final Fantasy VII Remake project. And that is pretty much going to wrap up this rather lengthy analysis of the Final Fantasy VII Remake opening cinematic, and I hope you enjoyed looking at all the various details within as much as I did. And I hope you like and share this video, and if you're interested in more content, please subscribe and all that other stuff. But I will leave you here for the time being, adventurers, and as always, until next we meet.